I'm going to start off by telling you about my friend Katie. Katie is a 26-year-old full-time student in an intensive master's program. Her chief concern is feeling tired and fatigued. She skips breakfast and she eats at irregular times, often on the go, rushing from one place to another. When she does eat, she feels like her food just sits there like a rock. She feels like she is always bloated and she has trouble losing weight. Her mind is hard to shut off and she feels like she has a tendency to overthink things. Does Katie sound like someone you know? According to traditional Chinese medicine, this constellation of symptoms may actually be related to an imbalance of the spleen. When I say spleen, I do not mean the actual spleen organ that we learned about in anatomy class that recycles old red blood cells, but rather the spleen as defined in traditional Chinese medicine. From a traditional Chinese medicine perspective, the spleen plays several major roles, including but not limited to what we call transporting and transforming food and fluids, so digesting the food we eat and making it usable for our bodies. It also controls the muscles and provides circulation of blood and nutrients to the limbs. It also controls blood. That is to say, it keeps the blood from flowing out of the blood vessels, especially relevant with menstrual issues. When the spleen is healthy and working sufficiently, our bodies can digest the foods we eat and absorb nutrients easily, allowing for good generation of energy, nourishment of organs and muscles, and blood formation and blood flow. Knowing how the spleen functions normally, we can get a sense for what kinds of problems will arise when there is an imbalance with the spleen. Remember how one of the functions of the spleen was transporting and transforming food and fluids? Well, if there's an issue with the spleen, it makes sense that it can affect the digestive process. Another function we mentioned was that the spleen controls the muscles and transports nutrients from food to the limbs. So if there's a problem here, it makes sense that it can cause fatigue. The last function we mentioned was that the spleen controls blood. So if the spleen isn't able to perform its function of controlling blood, it makes sense that it can cause easy bruising and bleeding. So how do you make sure your spleen is functioning optimally? A major aspect of supporting the spleen is addressing diet. Incorporate warm foods that are easy to digest, including steamed veggies and roots such as squash, pumpkin, and sweet potato, soups, and stews. Also, it's important to cut down on raw, fried, and greasy foods, which are taxing on the digestive system. Eating meals at regular times also aids in supporting the spleen. And also, just taking care of the basics, getting adequate sleep and exercise, and trying to keep stress at a minimum. These are extremely important in keeping your spleen happy.